What event changed your way of thinking permanently? My stepdad actually sitting with me and explaining why he was hurt, disappointed when I fricked up. Happened in my early teens and the look on his face is still burned in my mind. To clarify, growing up I had a lot of dysfunctional relatives who'd punish me and the other kids in the family, but never explain why or what we did wrong. Just immediate punishment. No question, no nothing. The first couple times I screwed up, stepdad actually made an effort to figure out why and sort out the reasons I wasn't listening or was acting out. Nobody else had really done that. It immediately felt different and suddenly I realized, yes, I'm a huge butthole for saying doing whatever it was, or not doing something, since there was no reason for it. The fact he had empathy and understanding was huge for me. We have an awesome relationship and he's done more for me in the last 25 years than most other blood relatives did my entire life. That's awesome. I'm glad you have him in your life. My dad threw me down a set of concrete steps as a kid. I don't remember anything very well anymore, but the event sticks with me prominently. My short-term memory seems completely thrashed now that I am an adult. Sometimes people tend to forget the details of what happened during a situation, but not the way that it made them feel. Saw a guy on a bus have a seizure. I also have seizures. Surprised by how many people ignored it. Really started taking my health seriously after that. When I was in 8th grade, a boy in my class accidentally shot himself in the head while playing around with another boy from our class. Obviously, it was horrific. One 14-year-old is dead. The one who witnessed it is traumatized, and the family's pain was unspeakable. Later on the news they falsely claimed that the boys were playing Russian roulette. This was not what happened. The witness never said it. The police reports never said it. The parents never said it. The news just threw it in there to sensationalize the story on a slow news day. They sullied both boys' reputations and exploited the community's pain for a flashier news story. I never saw the media the same way again. Dang. My classmate was riding his bike without a helmet. He's now disabled and can't eat on his own. I absolutely changed my mind about helmets and now I wear one every time I ride a bike. I was in a pretty serious bike accident, landed headfirst and got knocked out. I owe my life to the helmet I was wearing. I remember seeing it dented and broken and just thinking that could have been my skull. My brother finally took wearing his own helmet seriously after that. Getting kicked out of my house on my 18th birthday really instilled the idea that I ought to make positive decisions for myself, not for the appeasement of others. I feel you. Stepdad kicked me out on my 18th birthday. Was homeless for a while there. He didn't even give me time to find a job. Luckily I had some friends that occasionally let me crash on their couch. Making a friend with abusive parents. Never realized how lucky I was to have a family that didn't even look through my things until I met someone whose parents broke down his door for locking it. Dude, crappy parents freak you up for life. It's arguably the single most important relationship of your existence. When a young family's house burned to the ground 2 days before Christmas, there they were, mom, dad, 2 boys and 1 girl, all the Christmas presents destroyed along with all their possessions. How easy it is to take our home for granted until it's taken away. Despite their devastating loss, the community came together and provided the family with housing, clothing, and the basics of life, along with a generous assortment of Christmas gifts as well. The death of my wife, the person I was, died the day she did. She was 39 and I was 37. I'm now almost 46. I look at life completely differently now. My priorities are different. How I look at work and career is different. How I look at friends and family is different. How I look at death is different. I have zero tolerance for bulls, shenanigans, and general fuckery now. I won't put up with it. Life's too short. I couldn't agree more. I lost my wife 12/28/20. As a teen I was troubled and lonely. An event took place in class. Everyone joked I would become a school shooter. That same day, this popular guy from class sat next to me on the bus. There were no other seats. It was awkward. Then we started talking. We had a really cool conversation. He offered me candy. We walked home together. I felt relieved I finally have a friend. He told me see you Monday. The next Monday, he was absent. He passed away. Because of this I try to show my love to those I love, and I always say I love you to people. I'm so sorry you lost such a good person in your life, but I'm also glad he was there for you when you needed him most. I hope things are better for you now. The first time my mom didn't yell at me for coming home past curfew. She calmly asked if I knew what time it was, and requested I try harder next time to be on time. I realized people can change. Therapy was working for her, and we could repair our relationship. This is so touching. It's such a powerful thing to see a parent right their wrongs. When I was young, like real young, before even starting school, I had a dog named Bear, and he was gentle and kind. He wasn't trained, but he was a good dog. Well, one day he got out and ran across the road to our neighbor's yard and was sniffing around their trash. That's when my neighbor came out of the house with a gun and shot him. My dog ran back to me and collapsed at my feet while I just watched him, not understanding what was happening. I think he was still breathing when my dad put him in a trash bag, tossed him in the bed of his truck, loaded up my mom and I, and drove us all to the dump where he threw my dog in like a piece of trash. That's all I can really remember of the incident. I was too young, so I can't remember who I was before, but I often wonder if I might have turned out differently if that hadn't happened. The dog we got afterwards was friendly, but he too wasn't trained and jumped on me constantly, scratching me. My dog, Bear, deserved to live. He didn't deserve to die like that or be treated like trash even in death. I've talked about it before, but I can't seem to shake it. I didn't even realize it mattered to me until I was in therapy at the age of 25 and started sobbing when I recounted the story to my therapist. That's trauma, my friend. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Being hit by a drunk driver. I should have died. I spent 2 years learning to walk again. It stole the last 2 years of my high school life. No prom, no graduation. I psychologically struggled with the trauma and the unfairness of the situation, all the while becoming addicted to oxy. Sober 13 years. However, even though I still limp and am an epileptic, I managed to overcome. I know exactly what I can do. I know how much pain I can take. I know that it is going to take more than an entitled, drunken idiot wielding a speeding ton of metal to take me down. In a weird way, that douche gave me the confidence I needed to be happy. You shouldn't have died, actually. My brothers got upset with each other and one of them attacked the other. It happened right in front of my 3 kids. I tried to break it up and ended up getting hit in the face with an elbow. When the attacking brother finally got off the other one, I told him to calm down and knock it off. His response was, "What are you going to do about it?" I gathered my wife and kids together and guided them out the door as the brothers attacked each other. I got to my car and my dad comes running up and asks what was going on. I told him they were fighting and I'm taking my family home. My father then tells me, "Grow up." It seemed like I did something wrong, that protecting my wife and kids was somehow secondary to his pride. Suddenly I was the bad guy. I got out of the car and told him not to tell me what to do with my family. He says, "Just like my brother, what are you going to do about it?" That's when I knew that my own family had no respect for me and my wife and kids. No concern. Was he asking for violence? What was I going to do about it? I haven't been the same since. You did grow up. They didn't. I grew up in a really abusive house where almost every move I made was deemed a mistake and I was usually screamed at or even beaten because of it. It makes one paranoid to even try the simplest thing lest you fail and pretty much stop attempting anything. I was 22 and had just become an electrical apprentice. I'm female. BTW. I was definitely not in a good place. Frankly, this was a desperation job. It was my last hope at building a life, and I was at the point where I would have offed myself if things didn't work out. It's a bit of a story, but I wound up working at an electrical company. I was hired as an electrical apprentice and knew absolutely nothing about electrical. I was put through our company's boot camp in our prefab shop to get me up to speed, which was pretty intense. I think it was the second day. We were combining rolls of wire to make pipe runs faster, easier. Combining black, red, and blue wires from single spools onto one spool. For example, After seeing I got the gist, the foreman running the shop walked away for a bit to take care of a few things. In the meantime, I was left to combine spools to send out to job sites. Well, I got through combining a group of spools into one big spool, and only at the end did I realize I had added one too many wires onto the spool, so it wasn't right. I completely panicked. I honestly expected to get screamed at and fired because I screwed up. This sort of reaction to a mistake on my part was my normal. I stood there in full panic mode about what to do. He came back in after a minute or two and saw I wasn't working and asked why. I wound up fessing up, body tense, completely expecting the worst, and he just looked at me confused and said, "So what? If you make a mistake then you just fix it." So we fixed it. No big deal. Didn't even take 5 minutes. No one in my life, ever, in 22 years, had ever said that to me. I cried so hard for days on after. I spent a solid decade deprogramming so much stuff. I'm 34 now and still catch stuff that I was raised to believe about myself and others. I learned so much and gained so much confidence from having worked there and with those people. I was able to get up the nerve to leave my abusive family behind. I didn't finish my apprenticeship. I'd always wanted to go to college, but had been discouraged. I decided to go back at 24 and moved across country to do it. My life is mine and it's a happy, if modest, one. And it all started with someone telling me it was alright to make a mistake. I will never forget that, and you shouldn't ever, either. Thanks, D. Ron. I used to be one of those "you won't have problems with cops if you're not doing anything wrong" types of people. Then one Saturday I was leaving a football game and a guy stole a beer tap handle from a concession stand and got mixed up into the crowd. Some cops saw it happen and thought it was me. 2 cops led me into the on-site holding cell area, where I exercised my First Amendment rights with some vulgarities, and a group of about 5 of them roughed me up pretty good. They eventually let me go, but with a ticket for petty theft and a mandatory court appearance, even though there was no evidence that I had the tap handle. It was just their word against mine. I had to take a PTO day to go to court about a month later. It was in a county about a 90-minute drive from my home. Met with the DA. He went over my case. I was adamant that I was not guilty and wanted to go to trial. The DA explained how expensive and a pain in the butt that is, and potentially risky for me, and said he'd just drop everything from my record if I did some community service. This just opened my eyes to how fricked over people get in our justice system. I was lucky. I had a car, the ability to take a PTO day, no kids to watch, the ability to do some community service in my free time, and petty theft was a pretty minor thing. I just think of the people who get screwed over big time and it makes me sick to my stomach. Our system sucks. When my now wife complimented me for something I knew to be true but didn't like about myself, I realized both that my own opinions were only opinions and that she was right for me. My daughter, Meredith, passed away 3 days after she was born. She was born 15 weeks early. She made me realize just how short life can be and that it can be taken away at any moment. I now only spend time with people that make me happy and are uplifting, and I try to be the best version of myself that I can be. I'm sorry for your loss. My daughter Catalina was 29 days old when she passed away. She was born 12-13 weeks early depending on how you count it. It definitely is a wake-up call. Getting mugged and beaten up for the first time. It made me realize just how overpowering trauma really is. You could not just be strong and get over it the way I used to think. You can think you are some super strong person, but when something truly traumatic happens to you, it all goes out the window. It was a few guys who were catcalling me and following me around. Then one of them ran up on me when I walked around the corner and beat me up and took my stuff. I had a broken nose and hand and bruises absolutely everywhere. I used to think of myself as a tough girl who would be able to brush off stuff like this, the way you saw in the movies. I got in some minor schoolyard fights which were never anything serious. After I got beaten up, I was shaken so horribly. It permanently changed my mind on how violence affects me. I was scared to walk around in my own neighborhood. I became so much more reclusive for a while because even just taking a walk in my neighborhood made me scared. Even when I tried to be strong, I would still be a shaky, nervous wreck when I was scared. I couldn't control myself from being traumatized, and that was the most important realization. Willpower means practically nothing in the face of trauma. You cannot willpower your way out of a heart rate of 150 and your hands shaking and your words stumbling, your chest hurting, barely able to breathe because you are so paralyzed by fear, because that is what would happen to me when I was scared. I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's about how trauma works. Crazy enlightening. You literally can't be strong with trauma. PTSD is freaking crazy. Was working my bones to dust for the company I work with, and as a result I was a toxic mess. Did that for 3 years and ended up in therapy cause of burnout. Now I only do the hours agreed upon in my contract and in general work more relaxed. There's only so much you try and keep it intact for the things you truly care about. Realizing how abusive my family really was, especially my mother, and how I was conditioned to not only enable the abuse, but seek out the negativity because it began to feel uncomfortable without it. I once read an article about a woman who survived the Holocaust, and she talked about for years all she could smell was rot, filth, burning bodies, so she tried to cover it up with perfume, and even when she wore too much she could still smell it. That made me rethink the way I feel about everything other people do. What if they're trying to escape something so bad it doesn't even cross our minds? Also, I was once in a house fire. I had my arms full. 2 kids that couldn't walk were tucked under my arms. 1 dog that was following well enough but I had to keep a hand on. And a terrified dog who I was dragging by the collar. The second dog broke out of my grip and ran back into the house. I couldn't leave 2 babies and the first dog alone outside, especially because it was winter. I was alone, and my body was the only thing keeping the babies warm and the first dog from running away into busy, fast-moving traffic. I couldn't run back into a burning house either. I couldn't grab their leashes either because their leashes were in the room that was on fire. The dog that had ran had found a different way to safety and the firefighters brought her to me. I now don't ever offer to be alone with more things than I have hands for in case of emergency. However, at another point in my life, people who lived with me owned a bunch of aquarium animals. Like a lot. Whose lives depended on the conditions inside those aquariums. Heavy, thick glass things that were like the size of the walls of the rooms. I kept imagining what would have happened if the house fire had happened when those animals were in the house, and that thought process is why I will not own any animal that cannot be safely, for the animal and the people, and easily removed from a building in case of a fire. Honestly, as a person who has had a few aquatic reptile pets and loves them as a real pet, this is an issue for me and I get bad dreams about it sometimes because there's pretty much nothing you can do except leave them there. When my ex of 6 years broke up with me, I got too comfortable in the relationship. I got soft. Now I'm rediscovering myself and trying to get back out there. After having been bullied to the point of being suicidal at my Catholic school, I realized that just because people claim to believe in a higher power, it doesn't mean they're actually good people. The only good people in this world are the ones who see a problem and act on it for the betterment of those who are in need. To that end, my parents and pediatrician are good people, as he prescribed moving to a new school district, and my parents sought the best schools and therapists once we got there, even though we were just barely out of being in poverty. That was over 13 years ago now, and I'm beyond thankful for that. But I'm also still bitter towards people who act all high and mighty because they are of God. I had a team of 10 that I looked after for a high profile project at work. Loads of strict timelines and organization needed. The kind of project where you had to answer an email immediately. One guy on the team was a high flyer. Just bought a house. Enrolled on a master's course. Confident. Went into work one day and was told he'd been jumped outside a nightclub with his head kicked in. He was on life support and unresponsive in a coma. The project kept progressing and timelines just as strict. But my priorities changed that day. I just kept thinking this doesn't matter. I try not to take anything for granted now and make sure I live my life, since it can all change in an instant. Great death-defying news though. He made it out of his coma with minimal brain damage and is slowly climbing high again. As a teen, an older friend suggested I pick 3 things I like about myself and focus on improving those things. You don't have to work on everything at once. Finding out that my mother lied to me about my dad and that she kidnapped us and took us to the other side of the United States without letting him know. Took him years to find us. My sister and I never trusted anyone after that. A thread on Reddit asking the older generation what this generation takes for granted. Best answer was over-the-counter medication. One answer said they had friends that died from the common cold, a scratch that got infected, and food poisoning, etc. It's interesting to speculate how many times modern medicine has saved your life. Mine probably at least the times. Stomach flu as an infant. Operation at 17. Appendix out recently. No infections from either surgery. Pretty much any time you needed antibiotics could have killed you. Death must have been so much more common before the modern era. When I was forced to protest against abortion outside of a clinic when I was a teenager, I went to a small Catholic school for 2 years of high school. I wasn't sure where my politics views were supposed to be at the time, but I had a lot of conservative influence due to the environment that I was brought up in. We weren't told that we were going to protest, at least I wasn't. I thought it had something to do with a fundraiser the school was planning, but no. I was made to stand with many other students and staff, holding signs with fetuses and demeaning degrading things written on them as we stood at the legal limit of the property and prayed a fricking rosary. From that moment on, I knew I couldn't be a part of any of that. I felt so horrible and alone. Nobody else felt bad or weird about it. My divorce. She told me what to wear, what car we bought, how to decorate the house, etc. Now my own house is decorated like I want. I drive a truck and wear black t-shirts with skulls. I like skulls. Independence Day. Came here to echo this. If they're truly a life-changing experience, it's a divorce. Watching half your life stripped from you, and more importantly, my children. It's a scar that never heals. 9/11. I was backpacking around outback Australia when I came into a town with a TV and, even 2 days after the attacks, saw the footage on repeat on every channel. I didn't understand how something like that could happen. Just couldn't explain it at all. I got curious, started reading books as I traveled, and by February 2002 I was sitting in a first-year university classroom and taking my first class in international relations. Over the next 10 years I earned degrees, wrote papers, got my PhD, and landed a job teaching IR to a new generation of college students in Europe. I wrote a couple of books, traveled the world to meet, work, and collaborate with other researchers, and got closer to understanding what happened that September day, and why. I haven't been back to my home in Australia in 15 years. My life is in a different corner of the world now. I was thousands of miles from NYC on 9/11, but just seeing it in TV, well, it changed my life enormously all the same. When my daddy passed away suddenly in my arms, it was like this veil was lifted and I started seeing the world clearly for the first time. I am so very sorry for your loss. Death is indeed an undeniable fact of this world. It's up to us to make our time here decent and worthwhile. When my son, Ethan, passed away at 3 days old, I strived to live in a way that would make him proud to say I am his mother. He taught me the truest form of love and that life can be taken away in the blink of an eye. Met my new partner, aged 40. I'd had a regular but lucky life, whereas she had experienced homelessness. I reassessed who I was. I had largely ignored the homeless. I didn't understand. There was the whole ignorance falling away from my eyes. Well, getting older, but I'm sure that's a bit obvious lol. I would have to say that the event that made the most impact on me was being in sales for 5 years, after thinking that that was what was the best thing for me at the age of 17. Back then, I thought I knew myself and what I wanted. I got my get and got into sales, where I made the most money I've made in my entire life, basically doubling what my own mother made in a year. However, after about 3-4 years I realized how much I was impacting many people's lives for the worse. It was not something that I wanted to do. It made me think back on the reason I wanted to get into sales in the first place. The reason for me, at the age of 17, was because the amount of money you made was directly correlated to the amount of effort and work you put in. When I work at 100%. There is no better feeling for me, even now, than putting your soul into your work. As I got older and was exposed more and more to the real world, I started thinking about the impact I wanted to have on those around me. This was something I never cared about before. I looked at life as if I was the main character, and everyone around me were pieces in a game in which the goal was to be as successful as possible. Eventually, you realize that everyone around you has a life equally complex and nuanced as yours. To them, you are simply a piece as well, and they are also trying to become the best that they can be. I think that my perspective will change again. I'm only 25 now, and I feel like I am learning more about the world than I ever have before, simply because I am looking at it instead of myself. Right now, I am going to college to become a nurse. I will be able to put my 100% into my work, which will directly impact the lives of others and set them on a path towards bettering themselves, rather than taking from them as much as I can get away with. The field is in need of people, and the average nurse is swamped with work. This is encouraging for me because I know I can really put my soul into it and still have work left to do. Watching people hoard toilet paper during this pandemic like it was effing gold, clearing out shelves of canned food like they have an underground bunker they're filling up for the next 5 years. I'm surrounded by buttholes. This pandemic has made it clear how many stupid, selfish buttholes there really are out there. It was a shock for sure. Depression. I was severely depressed for a long time. I was not taking care of myself. I hated my job, stopped talking to all my friends and lost a lot of them. Eventually I was able to manage it, but it taught me so much about myself and how I want to live my life going forward. My well-being is so important to me now, and I will prioritize it. That means more boundaries at work, with friends, taking the time to exercise and try to eat well. I take my time off and go on vacations. I do things so I enjoy my life today, rather than constantly plan for the future. Go to therapy if I need extra help. Some people think I'm selfish, but I won't go back to that place, and I think others need to realize how essential self-care is. You can't be good for anyone around you if you're not even good to yourself. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.